guys, this is George from Firehouse Music, and I'm here with my friend, student, luthier, guitar manufacturer, Lon Koslak. He recently started working for us here at Firehouse, or working with us rather, building some instruments for us and doing general repair work. I've known Lon a long time. Actually, come to find out, we played together when, like, he was, how old were you?
I don't even know, maybe 16, 15 or 16.
We played a gig together.
It's been many years.
Yeah, many years. Yeah, I was in my 20s back then. So yeah, it's a long time ago. Anyway, and we thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about some of the things that he does, because I have a project for him. So there's this guitar. It's kind of crazy with the million pickups and switches and everything. I really like the guitar, but I hate the neck. I don't like how this neck feels. And I'm sure for somebody else this neck may be fine, but I'm very particular about my necks. And something really cool that Lon does is he's able to take measurements from a neck, a good neck that you might like, and then basically duplicate it and fit it into any pocket that you want. So I was really intrigued by it, and we thought it'd be cool to film the whole process. Tell me a little bit about how do we do that, Lon?
Well, let's start off. We'll take a step back here and get a little bit more understanding of the project. Just like you said, you know, the necks, you're very particular, and that's a good way to be. Like when you're looking at a guitar, when you're building a relationship with an instrument, you know, a lot of people think, oh, one neck is better than the other, but it always boils down to just personal preference. So you're going to build these different preferences over time. No two necks are exactly alike, even if they're built to be very similar. They're not going to be exactly the same. They might play a little differently. So the most important thing in kind of looking at this project is, let's look at this instrument and see what do you like about it? What's kind of the factor in here that you seem to be drawn to, and what would you like to change most about it?
Well, obviously I like the versatility that it has with all these pickup configurations. The fact that it has a fixed bridge, it gives you a better sustain, so that's kind of good, versus a floating bridge where you lose some of that. And I do like the fact that it's kind of ugly, because it's you know, it's unique in its own way. It's not conventional.
If it was too perfect, you'd never play it.
Exactly. Yeah. You get to throw a little bit of personality. You know. About the neck, I can't quite put my finger on it because I think the contour on it is fine, but I think the frets are a little bit like low or maybe too narrow, because it feels grindy when you go to bend a string, you don't get enough like glide. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that means that the frets are either too like down, too low.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things that can cause that. Sometimes it can just be frets that need to be leveled and appropriately, or sometimes it can just be they need to be cleaned very well. Other times might need to have frets completely replaced. There could be a lot of different things that can be a factor in that. Also, could even just be the action of the neck, you know, the actual relief and the bend in the neck, coupled with the action that you have at the bridge. So really, when I'm looking at this, there's a few things that pop out to me immediately. This is obviously a Telecaster style body, and is this a Fender original neck? It looks like an aftermarket.
It is an aftermarket.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one thing that's really interesting about Fender Telecasters, Fender Stratocasters, and some of the similar models is that they're the bolt-on necks. Can you spin that guitar around here real quick so you can see that? So these necks are held together with just 4 bolts. And to people that, you know, start playing around with these instruments and making some changes, making some modifications, looks like a pretty simple swap. And it can be. It can also be a little bit more tricky than people think. Let's put that thing back around real quick. What's interesting here is this is a Stratocaster style headstock. Do you like that style on the headstock?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So if you look at this is more of a traditional Fender Strat kind of neck. Fender Telecaster kind of neck, and it has a much more narrow profile for the headstock. One other difference here that's very prevalent in Tele necks versus Strat necks is actually the heel and the heel pocket that goes behind it. So if you look at this, it's very squared off the way that this sits into the neck pocket, and you really want that heel to sit very solidly against the wood, that's how you're going to get that that mechanical transmission of vibration and sound. So the better attached that's going to be, the more sustained, the better tone you're going to get from your instrument. So when we look at this guitar, on the other hand, you might notice that since that's an aftermarket Strat neck, it actually has a curved heel down here. So I hypothesize that when we take this thing off of here, we're going to find that that neck pocket's going to be more squarely profiled like a Telecaster neck. So to make the changes here that we want to do, we want to keep this kind of profile. And George and I had a little conversation about this off camera as well. In some of the earlier versions of the Fender Stratocaster, they also had an enlarged headstock, which some people really love. So I know I kind of threw that as a thinker out there. Is that something you still want to do?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. And how do you feel about this Rosewood fretboard?
Yeah, maple and rosewood is fine. I want to keep the same tone woods on it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this graphite nut we don't really need, because we don't, being that the bridge is fixed, you don't really have to worry about friction up there or anything like that. So we can just use something like bone or tusk.
Yeah, bone or tusk is going to be a great option for tone. We can absolutely do the rosewood maple, kind of keep that same aesthetic. We'll enlarge the headstock and make sure that we get a pocket that fits that, or get the heel that matches that pocket really well. How do you feel about these frets, other than the glide factor? You mentioned earlier it's a little bit gritty.
Mm-hmm.
These look like jumbo frets. They're pretty wide. If you want one option, if you're going to be doing a lot of bends, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to add a little bit more height to it, so they can glide a little bit more. But if that's not a problem for you, we can probably just find a fret style that matches very closely to it.
Yeah, actually, the guitar that you pointed out before, this one,
Mm-hmm.
I forget how heavy this one is. This neck I like. And I think it's a little bit, it feels, at least in my hand,
Mm-hmm.
it feels wider, like across the nut,
Mm-hmm.
compared to that one. So I can keep my hand, I think the reason why I find this more comfortable is because I can keep my hand open while I play. And the frets, if you look at they're like more rounded.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they're wider than those.
Yeah. Yeah, these may very well be medium jumbos, and those being full jumbos. We can take a look at them. Either way, what we'll do is we'll actually, if we're gonna model it after this neck more or less that we're going for, but kind of go with the Strat style headstock.
Mm-hmm.
Then what we'll do is we'll take some calipers to the frets, measure the actual width, the height of the crown there, and make sure we get a good profile shape here to match whether it's going to be a pyramid shape or more of just the traditional crescent shape. And we'll find frets to match that. I think the next step really is we'll get some accurate readings on the actual radius of this fretboard, so we can make sure that the curve of the new neck matches the curve that you see here. After that, we'll take some other measurements and get a new neck going.
Nice. So let's go ahead and start with those measurements. Okay, so we're here in Lon's domain, or the shop here where he does all the maintenance and repair.
This is my new home. Thank you so much for welcoming me here. We're here in the shop, and we're going to take the first steps towards understanding George's necks on his guitar, and that'll give us some good goals to build the new neck for the instrument. So let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to use here first, and we'll take a look at this instrument here in a second as well. All right, let's take a look at George's Telecaster neck. This is the guitar that he would like to model the new neck after, at least in the aspect of the frets and the contour of the actual neck. So a few things to consider here. The fretboard might feel flat to people playing the guitar, especially if you haven't taken a real close look at it. But most fretboards are actually slightly curved. This allows for things like bends to be possible, and for intonation to be more even across the entire guitar. So what we're going to do here is understand what the radius is on this particular fretboard. Now, Fender's gone through a couple standards over the years, and most companies have some type of standard that they're going to be working with. For the some of the earlier necks that Fender made, they used a 7¼ inch radius. Then later on, it's more or less standardized on the 9½ inch radius. The most common one that I've found for aftermarket necks seems to be 12 inch. So we'll take a look at these three and see some of the differences in just a second. One thing that I wanted to point out is these tools right here you can find online. Many different retailers will sell them. These are called understring radius gauges and are really great if you're planning on doing some of your own setups or if you just need to do some quick diagnostic work like we're doing today. So George, if you can bring the camera over here, we'll take a look at these understring radius gauges with the guitar. So we're just going to slide that under the strings here so we can see if there's any type of gap between the fretboard and the gauge. Now sometimes in the cameras it's hard to see that, but there is a little bit of a gap there. And one thing we can also do to kind of help out that is just look and see if we can see light underneath the fretboard. Sure enough, or underneath the understring radius gauge. So that's obviously not our radius. It's going to be a little bit flatter than that. Just for a contrast here, we can take a look at some of the original gauges that were used regularly by Fender. This is the 7¼ inch radius gauge, and you can see how much more curved that radius is. A lot more light coming in from underneath that radius gauge. So I'm going to take a stab here at it, and I'm guessing that this one's going to be a 12. So again, we'll just slide that right underneath the strings. Make sure you get it under all of them here. And then we will prop that up against the fretboard. That's looking pretty good. Let's see what we got here. We got just the tiniest bit of light coming through under the inlay, and that's pretty flush when we're looking at there. So we're going to call that a 12-inch radius, and that's the radius that we'll carve into George's new neck. The next thing that we'll do here to get the specs that we like is we're going to take a look at this digital caliper here, and we're going to actually measure the width of each of these, of one of these frets here. These should be standardized across the guitar, and we'll also measure the height of the fret here to the fretboard. That'll give us a good estimate. We may not be able to get exactly the same fret, but we will get it pretty darn close. And stay tuned for the next episode where we start actually planing the wood to get this neck under construction.